In the dim light of the evening, the intercom rang. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and looked at the monitor. My mother-in-law and Stella were standing side by side. They had come to help. I hurried to the front door, opened it, and was stunned. "Come on, please bring everything in," my mother-in-law commanded. Movers entered the house, cheerfully saying, "Excuse us." "What? Wait, what's going on?" I exclaimed, totally confused. Hearing my distressed voice, my son Wyatt, who had been in his room upstairs, hurried down the stairs. "What's wrong, Mom?" Wyatt asked, watching the movers bustle around. "I don't know," I replied, still not understanding as I looked back at Wyatt. "We're taking this house. You guys need to get out," my father-in-law Thomas announced efficiently as the movers brought items into the living room and other rooms. Suddenly, Wyatt's face turned pale, and he shouted, "No, you can't. Don't you know, Auntie? This house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted." Thomas turned around, and the movers stopped in their tracks. Everyone's attention was on Wyatt, who was trembling. "My name is Victoria. I'm 41 years old. My husband Isaac is 42 and a businessman. Isaac is calm by nature, doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble, and works hard every day for our family. His hobby is watching movies with me on weekends. Until last year, our son Wyatt used to join us too, but since he started middle school, he's been more into extracurricular activities and hanging out with friends." Though I felt sad, Isaac seemed to find it heartwarming. He often reminisces about choosing a local public high school over a prestigious private one where his parents worked. He talks about being class president, student council president, and his best friend from high school. "Your best friend was Thomas, right, Isaac? You've always been such a good student," I tease. Isaac laughs and says, "My parents would have a fit if they heard that." He gets nostalgic, saying, "Still, those were fun times." "Are you having fun now?" I ask while we watch a DVD at home. Isaac simply replies, "I am." Then he looks around the living room and corrects himself. "Well, actually it's more like happiness. We chose and bought this house ourselves. I have a wonderful wife and a lively son." He says it with such a sincere face that it makes me blush. "I couldn't ask for more," he adds. "That's where you say, a beautiful wife," I say playfully, swinging my arm. Isaac laughs, dodging it. Yes, having a beautiful wife makes me happy," he says. "Now all that's left is to work hard to pay off our mortgage." We're still paying off the mortgage on our house. Isaac has arranged it so I can stay at home without financial strain. I'm lucky to have such a kind husband like Isaac. As we sat side by side watching a DVD, I thought about this. Isaac has always said he's happy with our married life, but I can't help but think he wasn't very happy before our marriage, especially when he lived with his parents. It's pretty obvious given the not-so-great relationship he has with them and his sister Stella. I heard that the whole issue started when Isaac chose not to attend the high school his parents wanted him to go to. Stella, 2 years older than Isaac, obediently followed their parents' wishes, attending the high school they chose, keeping the high grades they expected, and even working at a company they approved of. "She can't think or decide for herself," Isaac says. "That's the situation. It's easy to just do what your parents tell you, but it also makes you dependent and incapable of making your own decisions or adapting to different situations." This inability to think or make decisions on her own made it hard for her to adapt to different situations. When she started working, she found herself unable to do anything without explicit instructions. Feeling uncomfortable, she left the company in less than a year. Then, her parents quickly arranged a marriage for her, and she ended up marrying the man they chose. Despite having Isaac, they adopted my brother-in-law as their son and had him live with them. To me, it doesn't make sense to adopt a son when they already have a perfectly good eldest son, Isaac. Speaking of their family, my father-in-law is just a regular businessman. I also didn't see the need for them to financially overextend themselves to send their kids to private high schools. "Oh, that's just my parents' silly pride," Isaac says. There was a wealthy family living near his parents' house, and their daughter was the same age as Stella. They used to play together as kids, but from elementary school, she went to a private school and ended up distancing herself from the other neighborhood kids. There wasn't any particular incident with that family, but Isaac's parents seemed quite envious of them. They became determined to send their own children to private school as well, saving hard to afford Stella's private high school education. Because of this, dinners at home were simple, but Stella's lunches were always extravagant, leading to a rather peculiar dietary lifestyle. Isaac, seeing no need to strain himself by attending a private high school, chose to go to a public high school instead. I think that was a wise decision. However, my in-laws were furious, and their attitude towards Isaac changed drastically from that day. They used to take pride in the envious glances they received when mentioning the prestigious high school their daughter attended. When asked about their son, they might have felt embarrassed to admit he attended a public school. They dreamed of a life of unnecessary luxury, which wouldn't have been good for them. My in-laws and Stella's family, along with their 3 children, live in a rented house. I'm not saying that renting a house is bad, of course, but I do wonder if there were other ways they could have used their money effectively. Instead, they went into debt to send Stella through private high school and college, and they're still paying it off. I could never really understand my in-laws' view on money. This was also evident in the disparity in Christmas gifts given to Stella's children compared to Wyatt. It could be because they lived together, but it seemed unfair to Wyatt. I couldn't help but sigh at the thought of Wyatt being affected by this. My in-laws also seemed to dislike the fact that we own our own house, a 2-story house with a 4-bedroom layout that's larger than theirs. A study room, huh? Pretty bold for someone from a public school, one of them once remarked. They'd occasionally visit our house and make snide remarks. Furthermore, they nitpick things like stains or discoloration on the hardwood floors and then dismissively comment that it's not all that impressive after all. Honestly, I don't see the point in them doing that. If they don't like it, they don't have to come over. Isaac thinks it's because they're jealous. They don't have money themselves, and yet here we are, owning a house, even with a mortgage. Isaac laughs, saying, it's all because they're always trying to make themselves look good. Outside of this, my brother-in-law is probably not poorly paid, and my father-in-law, even in his 60s, is still working. But their debts are holding them back. Don't worry about it, Isaac says. However, when Isaac and Wyatt aren't around, my mother-in-law and Stella take the chance to visit lately. They started exploring the house while I made tea. Let's make this our bedroom, they said, imagining a European-style room. They suggested using the large room as a study for the kids. Their assumptions bothered me. When I asked what they were doing, annoyed, they smiled awkwardly and said they were just looking around. They asked for a spare key, but I couldn't trust them wandering through our things. It felt selfish after they treated Isaac badly. I said I needed to talk to Isaac first. Isaac later declined politely over the phone. Isaac's health became a priority when he was diagnosed with cancer. The initial tests for stomach issues revealed widespread cancer. Doctors said he needed surgery urgently or had only a few months to live. Our insurance didn't cover everything: hospital bills, living expenses, and the mortgage piled up. Facing the fear of losing Isaac and our uncertain future, I felt overwhelmed. With no living parents or relatives to turn to, I was unsure what to do next. We visited Isaac's parents and Stella's family to explain our situation and ask for financial help. Stella didn't fully grasp how serious Isaac's cancer was. While Isaac's parents weren't as reluctant as Stella, they hesitated to offer financial assistance. We heard you recently finished paying off your debts, I pleaded. Please lend us the money for Isaac's surgery and hospital stay. We'll repay you, even using the money meant for private school fees. We can't, Isaac's parents replied firmly. We've only just started enjoying some financial stability. Besides, I have life insurance that covers the mortgage if I die. We could sell the house then and repay you. Despite our repeated begging and offering to sign a promissory note, they shook their heads. We were left feeling desperate and hopeless. Why not sell the house now? They suggested. We knew that might be our only option eventually. However, selling now meant subtracting the remaining mortgage from the sale price and still needing enough for hospital bills, treatment costs, and rent for a new place to live. Even after Isaac moved out, he used to send money home when he was single. We felt it was fair for his parents to help now. Despite our pleas, Stella and my in-laws didn't change their minds. Isaac stood firm and calmly said, "Okay, that's enough." As we were leaving, my brother-in-law stopped us. "Wait a minute," he said, looking embarrassed. "I don't have much savings, but here's $2,000. It turned out he had also been helping with debt repayments, despite their claims of being debt-free. "I'll try to convince them again," he promised. We thanked him deeply for his kindness. "Do you have any other plans?" he asked. Isaac nodded. We're considering selling the house, as Stella suggested. What? I couldn't help but exclaim. Selling the house isn't easy. It takes time and procedures. It won't be quick enough for Isaac, who needs to be hospitalized soon. And even if we sell, finding a new place to live isn't straightforward. It's okay, Isaac reassured me with a smile. I have someone in mind who might help. Over the past 2 years since Isaac's diagnosis, he fought hard despite being told he had little time left. We made many happy memories together as a family, navigating through multiple hospital admissions and releases. Though we had grown distant when the doctor said he might not come back home this time, I contacted Isaac's parents' house after that. They did visit a few times, but they always left quickly, saying Isaac seemed okay. It felt like they were just checking how much time he had left. I shook off the upsetting thought, thinking it couldn't be true. When the doctor told me the end was near, I called my mother-in-law in a hurry. "Oh my, that's terrible," she said. "We must hurry." I asked her to come to the hospital right away. She hesitated but agreed vaguely before hanging up. Despite her unsettling response, I returned to Isaac's hospital room. Only my brother-in-law, who came straight from work, and Isaac's close friend, Thomas, arrived. Isaac weakly opened his eyes, looked at everyone, and closed them for the last time. My brother-in-law and Thomas handled the funeral arrangements while we went home. We had left in such a rush that morning that we hadn't even cleaned up breakfast. As the sun set, Wyatt and I turned on the lights in the house. Sitting in the brightened living room, I started looking through a photo album. Tears flowed as I picked a photo for the memorial service. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my tears and saw my mother-in-law and Stella on the monitor. They came to help, I thought. They hadn't made it in time for Isaac, but they were here now. I hurried to greet them at the door, only to find movers entering our house. Confused, I asked, "What's going on?" Wyatt rushed downstairs from his room, equally bewildered. "What's happening, Mom?" Wyatt asked, watching the movers rush around upstairs. I don't understand," I replied, bewildered. As they spoke, my father-in-law ordered the movers to fill the living room and other rooms with belongings. Wyatt suddenly changed, shouting, "No way. Don't you know, Mom, this house isn't Dad's anymore, and it's haunted." My father-in-law stopped at Wyatt's words. The movers froze. Everyone turned to look at Wyatt, visibly shaken. Just then, Thomas entered and demanded, "What are you doing? You can't bring stuff into someone else's house without permission. Get out right now." Thomas's loud voice startled everyone. Confused, the movers quickly removed the belongings they had brought, leaving them on the street. "My desk," I exclaimed sadly as I turned around. My brother-in-law and his 3 children arrived, upset to find their things on the street. He asked Stella what was going on, having rushed over after a sudden call about moving. "Mom said they were moving," Stella replied, but my brother-in-law was clearly angry. "You agreed to this too." Amid their argument, my brother-in-law coldly announced, "I can't deal with you anymore. I want a divorce." "What? What are you talking about?" Stella exclaimed. Ignoring her, my brother-in-law arranged for the movers to take only his and the children's belongings to his parents' house. "I'm sorry to trouble you at such a difficult time. For now, I'll have the movers take my kids and our stuff," he said, not looking back at Stella. They left together, leaving Stella behind. Stella collapsed in tears on the street, and my in-laws stood bewildered among the scattered belongings. Neighbors gathered to see the commotion, turning it into a nightmarish scene. "Can we at least move these things inside? They're in the way," Thomas suggested. I agreed. "Yes, that's fine. This is your house, after all." "What do you mean?" my in-laws asked, clearly confused. Here's the real story. 2 years ago, after Isaac's parents refused to help us, Isaac brought home a very intimidating man named Thomas. He owns a real estate business and had given me his business card. I heard he was Isaac's high school classmate, but his appearance made me think he was from a different world. Wyatt, even as a middle schooler, was scared and clung to me tightly. I glanced at Isaac, who burst into laughter. "It's okay, Mom. Thomas may look intimidating, but he's a respectable businessman now." Wyatt cautiously added, "Thomas is actually a good guy." Suddenly, Thomas playfully smacked Isaac on the head, and despite Isaac being sick, he laughed heartily. I couldn't believe it, but it lightened the mood. Thomas never attended our wedding, even though we invited him. He never visited when we asked him to. The name Thomas often came up in Isaac's stories about his school days and nights out. From those stories, I had pictured a reliable, good friend, not the intimidating businessman. I don't attend weddings or visit homes because my scary appearance might cause trouble, Thomas explained. So that's why you're still single, huh? I'll hit you again, Isaac joked. Listening to their banter, I chuckled. Both of them stopped and looked at me. Sorry, it's just that Isaac is so childishly excited. He's always like this, Thomas. Yeah, Wyatt is here, remember? Isaac added, trying to maintain his dignity as a father. Dignity, huh? Dad never had that in the first place, Wyatt interjected, lightening the mood. I told Thomas how disappointed Isaac had been that he couldn't attend our wedding and express our wish for him to visit us anytime. Thank you. Now let's move on to business. We don't have the luxury of time, Thomas said, becoming serious. Thomas inspected each room of the house and then took out his laptop to propose a price. It took my breath away. It was higher than what we paid for the house. That's a very generous valuation, but can you really sell it at this price? I asked. It's been about 10 years since you moved in, and while there are stains and old hardwood floors, it's still livable. It will sell at this price, Thomas reassured me. All right, please proceed at this price, I said with a smile. Thomas laid out several documents on the table, including rental agreement forms. I'll purchase this house directly, resolving your first concern, Thomas announced. Then, I'll rent it back to you, addressing your second concern as well. I was stunned as Thomas continued explaining his plan. I'll transfer the money from the house sale to your account within a few days. You can use it to pay off the remaining mortgage, he said confidently, his intimidating demeanor replaced by a joyful grin. As we filled out the documents, I noticed the rental amount, $200. Both Isaac and Wyatt were surprised. Leaning over to inspect, Isaac chuckled. You mean $2,000, right? No, it's not a mistake, Thomas replied. I owe that much to Isaac. After a moment of thought, Isaac simply said, No, you don't. Thomas then shared a story from their school days. He had been a troublemaker, frequently in fights and causing his single mother much distress. One day, seeing his mother hospitalized from exhaustion and stress, he realized the impact of his behavior. Determined to change, he stopped fighting and stayed out of trouble. However, he was falsely accused of starting a fire at school due to his past reputation. Isaac, the student council president at the time, believed in Thomas's innocence and fought for him. No one else believed me, but thanks to you, I graduated, Thomas recalled gratefully. That's why I owe so much to Isaac, Thomas explained. Moved by the story, our family gratefully accepted Thomas's rental proposal. This was what happened 2 years ago, Wyatt added proudly. Now Thomas owns this house and is renting it to us. Thomas smiled warmly at my in-laws. If any of your families want to rent the house, that's fine too. I can offer it at a very reasonable price. I can also introduce you to new properties. After a smooth funeral, we moved into a 2-bedroom apartment Thomas had recommended. Curious about his plans, I asked why he believed we would move back to the house. Well, actually, Thomas whispered, I considered evicting them at first, but then I changed my mind. Here's the plan. 3 days later, we returned to the house under the guise of retrieving forgotten items. Thomas came along, and my mother-in-law reluctantly served us tea and snacks. How do you like living here? Wyatt asked, trying to lighten the mood. It's not bad, his father-in-law replied cheerfully. Have you ever heard strange noises on the stairs or in the bathroom when no one's supposed to be there? Wyatt asked, looking around nervously. I did see something like the hem of a skirt at the top of the stairs once, thinking Mom had returned, but no one was there, Wyatt added quickly, interrupting his mother-in-law. Wyatt and Thomas both turned their heads to look upstairs when they heard this. Is someone upstairs? Thomas asked, surprised. That's impossible, Stella, who had been quiet since her divorce was decided, muttered. Cut it out with the weird talk. I didn't hear anything, I said, trying to dismiss the eerie atmosphere. Wyatt and Thomas exchanged glances and hastily gathered their things. We'll be taking our leave now, Thomas said hurriedly as they left the house and got into the car. The in-laws, who had come to see them off, looked frightened. In the car, we burst into laughter. Thomas had improvised on Wyatt's story about seeing a ghost. It's punishment for being cold and distant to Isaac for so long. What kind of parents and sister leave their dying son and plan to move into his house? Thomas said, his frustration evident in his voice. Thomas and Wyatt kept adding to the story, even inventing paranormal phenomena that never happened. The in-laws and Stella were scared silly, mistaking normal house noises for ghosts, I explained. The power of suggestion is scary, isn't it? Wyatt chuckled. Unable to bear it anymore, Stella and the in-laws moved out of the house. Thomas helped them find a cheap apartment within their budget. That's just business. I made sure to refer them, Thomas said with a sly grin. Wyatt and I applauded him. By the way, Stella had to start working again after divorcing her husband to pay child support. She's facing the harsh realities of life now that her parents are gone, I added sadly. We returned to the house we bought with Isaac, finally at peace. We can't buy back the house, but we still get to live there for $200 a month. My brother-in-law and his 3 kids have started visiting again. Stella seems interested in reconciling, but he's not considering it right now. Once a month, Thomas comes by under the pretext of collecting rent, always on the monthly anniversary of Isaac's death. After paying respects at the altar, we have dinner together. Thomas listens to Wyatt's high school troubles, and we all share stories, including new tales from Isaac's student days that Thomas sometimes shares. These stories reveal sides of Isaac we never knew, and I'm sure Isaac is laughing with us at the dinner table. Sometimes, Thomas would make excuses like a child, saying, "Well, you know,